Two of the 7 Henrico deputies charged with second-degree murder in the death of an inmate who died while in custody are now out on bond.
Attorneys reveal what they say a videotape shows in the moments leading up to the death of an inmate as the deputies charged in his death appear in court.
Well, I think it's very important that we see that footage as soon as possible. It's certainly far too soon to point fingers at any individual.
And we take a look at what happens when somebody experiencing a mental health crisis is taken by police under an emergency custody order to the hospital. Why might they be taken to the jail from there?
Senator Creed Deeds asking for better facilities and better training.
It's so important that before we make too many judgments, we found out exactly what happened. To me, this story speaks to the urgency of getting crisis intervention training for 100% of our law enforcement officers.
The CBS 6 News at 6 starts right now.
We have complete in-depth coverage on that story for you tonight. Good evening. I'm Janine Samuels.
And I'm Bill Fitzgerald, anchoring our coverage live from Henrico County Jail West, where those deputies worked. It's also where Irvo Otieno was taken into custody by officers as a potential burglary suspect on March 3rd. Then, March 6th, after observing him, those officers put Otieno under an emergency custody order and took him to Central State Hospital for evaluation. They say he became combative and was brought to a local jail where he later died during the intake process. The sheriff's deputies involved in the incident were in court today on second-degree murder charges. We start our team coverage with senior reporter Wayne Koval to break down what happened inside the courtroom today and the evidence being considered. Some of the details Wayne learned you might find disturbing. Wayne?
Well, Bill, as family members of the jail deputies walked out of Dinwiddie Courthouse this morning after seeing their loved ones on a courtroom video screen, 2 of those 7 deputies in jail learned that they had made bond and would be getting out from behind bars. The arraignment also brought out more details about what had happened.
The Commonwealth attorney has taken a very aggressive position here.
7 Henrico County Sheriff's deputies, each facing a second-degree murder charge, had their first appearance in court Wednesday morning. Carrie Bowen represents Deputy Jermaine Branch.
Our client has been there for 24 years.
Judge Joseph Teefee granted Deputy Jermaine Branch and Deputy Bradley Deasy bond. But during the arraignment process, more details about what happened to 28-year-old Irvo Otieno, both at the Henrico County Jail and Central State Hospital, came out. Commonwealth's attorney Ann Baskervill said the preliminary cause of death is asphyxiation.
He was held down on the ground, prone on the ground for 12 minutes by all 7 of our defendants charged here, including this one. So much so that they smothered him, and they smothered him to death.
Baskervill says the state medical examiner will now need to view 2 videotapes, one at Henrico County Jail, which she says shows a naked Otieno being tackled and struck by 5 deputies, and the 12-minute video from Central State Hospital, where Otieno had his hands handcuffed in front of him with shackles on his feet, and Baskervill says where 7 sheriff's deputies had Otieno on the ground. Baskervill says there is also concern about 2 injections Otieno received at Central State Hospital during or after the altercation.
He stopped moving and probably died before the injection was given.
Bowen says some deputies believe the interjections contributed to Otieno's death.
I think that's what some of these people that are charged believe, but I have not talked to the staff at Central State that saw that. At least the way it was told to me was once the injections, 2 injections, and once that was administered, there was no more. I mean, he was not responsive even.
Defense attorney Edward Nickel represents Deputy Bradley Deasy, told me he was glad Deasy made bail. Nickel also tells me he believes the charges were made prematurely and will now work to clear Deasy's name.
It is extremely clear and extremely alarming.
During the altercation at Central State Hospital, Commonwealth's attorney Ann Baskervill tells me there were Central State employees watching and some did join in. More charges may be coming soon. Bill?
Thank you, Wayne. And as for the two deputies that were granted bond, our Tyler Lane was outside Meherrin River Regional Jail in Brunswick County when they were released. He's live now with those details tonight. Tyler?
And Bill, we were the only news crew here at the jail today when those two deputies were released on bond right here through these doors behind me. Now, we asked both of those men for a response to the claims against them, but neither spoke with us. Henrico County deputies Jermaine Branch and Bradley Dissy were held here at the Meherrin River Regional Jail in Brunswick County after being charged with second-degree murder and the death of Irvo Otieno. Around 2:15 Wednesday afternoon, they were both released on bond, with people waiting to pick them up. Branch was first to be released, and he was covered with a scarf as we approached with our camera. Is there anything that you want to say about the charges against you? Can you tell us what happened leading up to Otieno's death?
Can you respect my family and move?
Is there a message that you want to say to the victim's family? We gave Branch a final opportunity to respond, but he got into the car without making a comment. Less than 10 minutes later, Dissy was also released through what appears to be a garage door of the facility. He was shielded by a jacket as we approached. Mr. Dissy, is there anything you want to say about the charges against you? Can you tell us what happened leading up to Otieno's death? Do you have a message for the victim's family? We just want to give you an opportunity to respond to the charges. Dissy entered a vehicle and left the jail without making a comment. Now, the 5 other deputies that are charged in this incident are still being held in custody right here at the Meherrin River Regional Jail in Brunswick County. And Bill, I'll go ahead and send it back to you.
All right, thank you, Tyler. State Senator Creed Deeds, a longtime advocate for the improvement of Central State Hospital specifically and behavioral health resources there, is speaking out about the death of Irvo Otieno, who was admitted there last week. Our Elizabeth Holmes spoke with Deeds today.
Senator Deeds says he immediately began reaching out to law enforcement and behavioral health leaders in the area to figure out what may have happened at Central State and where things went wrong. He says even though the current conditions of the hospital are not ideal, he does not think they may have contributed to Otieno's death.
I think the family and the community deserves answers. We need to figure out exactly what happened, why it happened.
Senator Creed Deeds sharing concerns over what happened at Central State Hospital, leading to the death of 28-year-old Irvo Otieno, a mental health patient transported there March 6th. The story is personal to the senator. His son, who dealt with mental health issues, brutally stabbed him, then died by suicide in 2013.
Not be so crisis-driven, that we try to keep a focus on this and keep a face on the problems.
When we interviewed Creed Deeds back in 2018, he noted the age and condition of the hospital structure, saying it was, quote, held together by duct tape. Years later, despite little improvement, he says the employees are doing the best they can.
I don't know if the current condition of Central State Hospital can bear any of the blame for what happened to this young man.
The incident, he says, highlights a need for training.
To me, this story speaks to the urgency of getting crisis intervention training for 100% of our law enforcement officers, because so often when they are called out to confront the public, somebody in the public, there's a mental health implication, and you just need the tools that crisis intervention training provides.
Senator Deeds says construction for a new Central State Hospital is set to be completed in 2026. He said he hopes this incident and any investigation does not delay that opening date. In the studio, I'm Elizabeth Holmes, CBS 6 News.
And so we're asking questions about why Mr. Otieno was taken to a hospital originally to receive treatment for his mental health crisis, but then arrested and transported to the Henrico Jail. Our Melissa Hippolyte joins us now from the studio with insights from 2 experts. Melissa?
Well, Bill, I talked to a psychiatrist and former law enforcement officer about what the process is when someone is experiencing a mental health crisis and is taken to the hospital under an emergency custody order, and why they might end up in jail. When Henrico police responded to a home on Fordson Road at 11:34 a.m. on March 3rd for a possible burglary call, they identified Irvo Otieno as a potential suspect. A spokesperson for the police department said officers used their crisis intervention training and identified that the person was experiencing a mental health crisis. So they issued an emergency custody order and transported him to the crisis receiving center at Henrico Doctors Hospital. Once there, Otieno would have been met by the hospital's psych team and medical team, according to Dr. Martin Buxton, the former chief of psychiatry at Chippenham and Johnston Willis hospitals.
Somebody would try to calm him, talk him down.
Buxton, who is unconnected to this case, says that if that didn't work and the individual was combative, the staff would have restrained them.
But if somebody was violent and you could not slow them down, they're tearing up the emergency room, you would restrain them and try to medicate them.
In the case of Otieno, Henrico police say he became physically assaultive toward officers at the hospital, so they arrested him and transported him to the Henrico County Jail, where he was charged with assault on a law enforcement officer, disorderly conduct in a hospital, and vandalism.
Would you expect in a situation like what I've described that the staff would have at least tried to put a drug in them that ultimately would have calmed them?
No question.
We don't know if the hospital staff did or did not give or attempt to give a calming medication. Mark Bong, who used to work in law enforcement and is currently an attorney in Henrico who often represents police officers, says he wonders why the officers decided the best course of action was to take Otieno to the jail.
Someone who is in a hospital setting who then gets placed in a jail setting is probably getting insufficient treatment, especially on the weekend. The availability of medication and treatment are going to be greatly reduced in a jail environment than they would be in a hospital environment.
Jails are clearly not the optimal place for a psychiatric patient. They could be re-traumatized, they could be stirred up, the noise, the lack of capacity to sleep. All those things go against mental health.
Buxton says it's possible there were no psych beds available at Henrico Doctors or other hospitals.
Was there a bed at Forest? If not, were they trying to get another bed in town and they couldn't find one because Central State used to be the designated backup, and whether Central State had a bed. They may have decided they couldn't manage them there, or they didn't have a bed there, and there was no psychiatric bed available in town. I mean, that happens.
Lots of questions still. We have asked a variety of entities in Henrico County, including the police and mental health services, about what exactly happened in this situation, and we are still waiting to hear back. Bill?
Thank you, Melissa. And CBS 6 will continue to follow this story as it develops. You can watch our updates and all of our in-depth coverage just by downloading the free CBS 6 News app.